Hello Runeterrans, and hopefully welcome back. Yesterday we got our first card reveal for the upcoming expansion Beyond the Bandlewood, and it was exactly that, a card reveal, as in singular, as in one. But today we go in the exact opposite direction. We get a whole bunch of reveals, a cornucopia of reveals, a veritable feast of new cards to talk about. And so we are going to dive right in, and we are going to start with Aloof Travelers, because I adore this card. This is a 4-cost 3/4. It has the Yordle tag, and it belongs to both Piltover and Zaun and Bandle City. Again, we have some cards with these dual regions now. And Aloof Traveler says when I'm summoned, both players draw 1, then your opponent discards their highest cost card. Now, I really like this design for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I think this is one of the best ways to make discard not feel absolutely awful and terrible. As somebody who's played a lot of card games and dealt with discard in a lot of formats and genres and games, it can feel really bad if your opponent's entire game plan is to just make you discard all your cards and then you're just doing nothing. It's not even just that you're doing nothing, but you don't even have cards to stare at, right? You don't have the ability to make any sort of game plan for how to get yourself out of it, because every turn you're just drawing a card, right? So traditionally, discard is a very one-sided mechanic, and it makes one player usually feel awful. In this case, you're still ending up +1 in terms of the net cards gained, right? Normally with discard, it's either a 1-for-1 trade. I play a card that makes you discard 1 card, or in some cases, it might be I play 1 card and you discard 2 cards. But in this, you're still ending up like net +1 because both players draw 1 card and then the opponent discards 1 as well. So you get that benefit, but also you still get the discarding portion, and it's targeted. You already know, okay, I'm going to hit the highest cost card in their hand. And so that gives you not just the discard effect, but it also gives you information, because depending on the kind of deck you're playing against, unless they discard something incredibly high, right? If you're playing against Jarvan Shen and you hit like Bright Steel Formation, well, that doesn't tell you much else about their hand. But if you discard like Screeching Dragon, then suddenly you know, okay, well, they also did not have Jarvan in their hand, and you can plan accordingly. So there's a bit of like information gathering here. You get the discard effect, you get the card advantage effect, and you're playing Piltover and Zaun, you're playing Bandle City, and you're likely playing Teemo with this card. Let's be honest, I love the idea of playing this with Teemo because it's another card that allows you to force your opponent to draw, and we like doing that. Okay, so speaking of Teemo, you had to assume that if Riot was giving us Bandle City, they're giving us more Yordles, they're doing all of these things that are kind of whimsical and fun. You had to assume that Teemo, who's kind of like the poster child for Yordles, was going to be getting some more support, and there are a lot more cards beyond Aloof Travelers that help that out. And so we're going to move on now and talk about Ava Achiever. This is a 6-cost 4/4 Yordle. This is only Bandle City, so strictly Bandle City, not a dual region card. And Ava Achiever says when I'm summoned and round end, I plant 3 poison puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck. Then it also says traps on enemy cards are doubled when activated. Now, this is really interesting because it's essentially like a Dreadway effect, but on a 6-cost body instead of an 8-cost body. And I've personally played Dreadway Teemo in the past, so I'm really excited about this prospect. But also, I'm really enjoying this because it's when I'm summoned in round end. A lot of these cards are often summoned in round start, but because this is round end, you get a higher chance of getting at least 2 triggers from this, because if your opponent has essentially no mana left and you play this at the end of the round to close things out, well, you're going to get the summon effect. It's going to plant 3, and then the round ends and you get an immediate 3 more. So you're paying 6 to plant 6 with a 4/4 body, and then you're also doubling the effect. So this card, I think, has a place in Teemo decks. If nothing else, for the doubling effect, I think that that is a very big deal. You needed something beyond just Teemo to get double the value out of your puffcaps. Obviously, Teemo is still very important. The reason you need a high count of puffcaps is so that you are ensuring you're hitting them regularly, but you also need them to hit big when they do hit. And so Ava is like the other side of that puzzle, and I'm really a big fan. Now, again, we're still getting more Teemo support here, so we're going to move on to Lecturing Yordle. This is a 4-cost 3/5 with the Yordle tag from the Bandle City region, and Lecturing Yordle says, when I'm summoned or on attack, create a fleeting poison dart in hand. Now, good news, we know what poison dart is. We're going to see that on the next screen, but also this is a 4-cost 3/5 with a relevant summon effect, and you can repeat it on attack. I already am kind of a fan of this card, but we're going to move to the next screen because Poison Dart is not just a token card. This is a card that you can also run in your deck, and we're going to talk about that now. So Poison Dart is a 1-cost slow spell from Bandle City, and this says deal 1 to anything and plant 3 poison puff caps on random cards in the enemy deck. So this card is wildly good for Teemo decks. It's very similar in functionality to something like Gangplank's spell, for example, but the problem with comparing Poison Dart to Parlay is that with Parlay, it was 1 to anything, but then you also get like a bonus 1 if you kill something. With Poison Dart, it's 1 to anything, and you're always getting the plant 3, which could be as much as 3 more damage or more if you have an Ava on the board. But it's also a way to accelerate your game plan further. And so you have to assume if you're playing Teemo and you're trying to go this puff cap route, you are for sure going to be running peddlers. And so Poison Dart will plant by itself, will also trigger the peddlers. And again, the fact that it's 1 to anything is very relevant because sometimes in those really tight, those really close Teemo games, in the past, you would use your direct damage spells to target the Nexus, hoping that on the next draw, at the start of the next round, whatever the case may be, you maybe finish off your opponent. Now in the past, it's usually stuff like Mystic Shot, maybe even a Get Excited or 2, but now we have yet another tool that we can add to that toolbox. And so with the Lecturing Yordle, where you are creating this, you're getting that fleeting copy, but then also the ability to run this in your deck as well, I think we will have a good number of Poison Darts. And as somebody who's played a lot of Teemo, I am a fan of that idea. Now, we have another spell here on the screen, and I want to talk about that as well. This one is a Piltover and Zon spell. It is a 3-cost fast spell, and it's called Sump Fumes. It says deal 2 to a unit, so this one is unit specific, but if you've added 2 or more cards to your hand this round, deal 3 to it instead. Now, I really like the design of this because this is not if you have drawn, this is if you have added. So this counts created cards. This is going to make things like Ballistic Bot and specifically Chump Wump, who auto turns these things on, very, very valuable. I'm still not necessarily a big fan of this card in particular because we have way better removal tools in Piltover and Zon already. And so we get this conditional one that just doesn't feel great. This is 3 to deal 2 to only units and a conditional upgrade to 3 when we have things like Get Excited or even Gotcha or whatever. This just doesn't feel great to me. I don't think we're going to see much play for this card, if I'm being honest. We might see it in expeditions or whatever, but that's I think about the extent of it. We do have one last card on this screen, but like I said before, there's a whole bunch of cards, and so we have a whole nother screen to talk about. But we have Stinky Wump. This is a 1-cost 2/1 from Piltover and Zon. This does not have the Yordle tag. This is just a Wump. But this 1-cost 2/1 says, last breath, create a copy of me in the enemy deck with 2 poison puff caps attached. So this is fun because you're playing hot potato with a Stinky Wump going back and forth, but we get the bonus of sticking more puff caps in their deck, and then we could potentially double the ones that are on this or double the damage that they do, right? If we're running Ava, this will deal extra damage, so we get the benefit. And if we obviously hit them with Teemo, that would double the amount of poison puff caps on the Wump for them. But we do have to remember that if we put it in their deck and they draw it, they play it, and then it dies, it comes back to our deck. So we could be planting puff caps in our own deck, and we would then have to, you know, play around that, consider that, etc. But I think that we will likely see this at least tested because we have all of the ways to benefit from the puff cap triggers, and our opponents, unless that's the mirror match, don't necessarily have that. So I want to at least test it. We don't know how tight this deck is going to be because Teemo got an awful lot of puffcap support just from today's reveals, and it was already in many cases a pretty well thought out, well refined deck. So I'm very curious to see what this is going to end up being. But as I said before, we have some more cards to talk about, and we have more Teemo support. We have to start with Puffcap Pup on the screen, not just because it's on the left, but because it's a good boy. Look at that little thing. It's adorable. We also know that this is going to be a Guardian. We saw it in the game trailer. It was in the bottom left. And so I suspect this will be like the chip of the upcoming set where it's adorable and we all love it and we all would die for it. But there's other reasons to love Puffcap Pup. So this is a 2-cost 2/2 with quick attack. Doesn't have any tags, but it is from Bandle City. And it also says on strike, I plant 3 poison puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck. So this is like an Akshan for your puffcap deck. Now, obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison because Akshan is very viable for a number of reasons. But what I mean by that is that in the past, if you had said to me that, 2-cost 2/2s with quick attack would be viable, I would have been very skeptical. But we make up for it with really strong strike effects. And I think this is another one of those instances where specifically in puffcap decks, you will likely find room for the pup because I think that there are ways to abuse it. Now, again, it's going to take some testing because there's already a lot of stuff you want to run in your puffcap decks to begin with. But I think that this is at least good enough to pass like the smell test, and it would not shock me if it's included, and we'll have to wait and see. We also have Swole Scout. So this is a 4-cost 3/2 Yordle from Bandle City, single region. But Swole Scout says, when I'm summoned, if you've added 2 or more cards to your hand this round, you grant me +1, +0, and elusive. So this becomes a 4/2 elusive for 4, which is a really good stat line for elusives if you have added 2 or more cards to your hand this round. Now, as I said before, this is added, not drawn. So we do get benefits from things like Ballistic Bot, like Chump Wump. I think the real key for this is going to be whether or not it counts the card you draw each round. So if we can count the card you draw as 1 card added, and then we can count a Ballistic Bot as another card added, I think this card ends up being very playable and very good because that's a very easy threshold for you to pay for a 4/2 elusive. Now, we don't know for sure. I suspect that's how it works, but I just want to throw that out there. We also don't know if a 4/2 elusive is going to be worth it to run in a puffcap style deck because we want to also have a certain number of spells to trigger our peddlers, and we do want to get chip damage in. That much is true. So we do want some way to get that additional damage in so that we get them low enough that the puffcaps can finish them off. We very rarely are planning on killing anybody with just puffcaps, but whether or not a 4/2 elusive is the best way to go about that, I'm not necessarily sold. We do still have that age-old issue of, it's a 4-cost unit that dies to Mystic Shot and it has no immediate effect, right? It's not replacing itself. It's not creating something on the board, etc., etc. So while I think the stat line is fine, a 4/2 elusive for 4 is fine, I don't know that this ends up making the cut. I think that it'll be relatively easy to trigger, but I don't know that this makes the cut. And we unfortunately have a very similar situation with the next card. So the next card here is Yordle Newbie. This is a 3-cost 3/2, has the Yordle tag, is from Bandle City, and very similarly says, when I'm summoned, if you've added 2 or more cards to your hand this round, grant me +1, +2. Now, we've seen in the past a number of cards that are essentially a 3-cost vanilla 4/4 that are conditional and have not actually seen play. We've even seen true 3-cost 4/4s, and while some of those saw play, it wasn't necessarily as much because of the base card as it was that it was a scout that created them when they died. So we don't really have a lot of precedent for this cracking any sort of lineup, and I don't expect that to change. I think we can assume that this will not see a lot of competitive play either. And yeah, that's what we have on those two Yordles. I think that they have a very neat mechanic. I don't think we're going to see very much of them on the ladder though. We're going to end with Entrapment, which I think is potentially the most interesting card revealed today. I don't think that means it's the most powerful necessarily. I just really like what it's doing from a design perspective. And I'm going to talk about why in a moment. But first, the card. This is a 2-cost burst spell from Bandle City. It says pick one of 3 units or spells from the enemy deck. And then my head is covering the rest. But you know, if I kill my neck here, you can see the rest. And it says, and then you plant 3 poison puff caps on all copies of it. So this card is interesting because it rewards you for understanding what your opponent's deck is trying to do and remembering what they have drawn and what they have played. So if they've got a key card and you haven't seen them play any versions of it yet, and you're shown that during the choice selection, I believe the choice is going to be just like predict. You'll be shown 3 random cards from their deck and you'll pick one. But if you're paying attention, right? If you're playing again against like Jarvan Shen and you haven't seen any Jarvans yet, and it's relatively early in the game when you play this well, you could pick Jarvan and then you're increasing your chances of getting max value, because ideally you want a card that they have 3 copies or more. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you want a card where they have at least 3 copies of it, and hopefully they're all in their deck so that when they draw them, they take 3, because this is 3 puff caps per card. So this is a relatively good sized bomb that you're planting, but we can exploit it even further with cards like Ava or with cards like Teemo. And so that's another reason that I really like the design of this card, because it's burst speed and we can abuse that a bit through attack sequencing. You declare some attacks, and if you've got a leveled up Teemo, they assign blockers, and we know that our Teemo is likely to connect because they assigned blocks and then they just passed. They didn't do any sort of additional effects. Well, we can slap down Entrapment, and then suddenly we're in a situation where we plant bombs on cards, we Nexus Strike with Teemo, and now we've immediately doubled it. And so if you can get to a point where you are basically planting 6 puff caps on multiple cards in your opponent's deck, we are setting 6 damage bombs for our opponent. And that's a pretty big chunk of damage, and we could do that multiple times. So I'm a big fan of this card. The last piece of this though, and I've already tweeted about this earlier today, is that I just really love that it turns the tables. All right, so Zilean obviously creates a bunch of time bombs in the deck, and most Zilean decks are trying to do that multiple times. So we're going to get to the point where our opponent might have, you know, 10 or 20 time bombs in their deck. We're able to, with Entrapment, turn the tables and turn time bombs into time bombs, because we're going to make it so that they take 3 damage every time they draw a time bomb, and then they're going to deal, you know, 1 to everything, but we're outpacing them damage wise. Now, there are still ways that certain decks can get around it. The Infinite Loop deck, for example, could theoretically just continue to flood their deck, because this does not stick 3 puff caps on all copies of the card everywhere. It's only on the ones existing in the deck. So we do run into that weird situation where if they create 20 time bombs, we play Entrapment, they could just continue the loop and then put 20 more time bombs in their deck, 40 more, 60 more, which would in turn reduce the chances of them dying to the Entrapment. But we also force them to spend all that time doing it. Now, that doesn't really matter on the ladder. I'm sorry, we're not giving you a reprieve there. But in a tournament environment, we could see Entrapment used almost as a counter to the Infinite Loop deck, or at least as a stopgap, because we also know that the Infinite Loop deck can win without time bombs. That's probably the safest way to do it because you limit interaction, but we do know that it has other ways to win. But I just like that this card kind of flips the tables specifically on a card like Time Bomb, because you are turning Time Bomb into its own time bomb, and I just enjoy the irony. So this was it for the reveals. I am really excited for what I have seen from the kind of Teemo package. I'm even more excited to see what else comes from the expansion, both from the Bandle City region, but also what other deck archetypes they are potentially trying to prop up. If we are getting Teemo support, we might reasonably expect like Lulu support, Heimer support, you know, all of those existing Yordles could be getting their own kind of sub packages, and we could be seeing the resurgence of some of them. I know if you're a newer player, you might not realize this, but there was a time when Heimer was a legit top tier meta deck. We might see the return of that. Probably not, but we might. And Anyway, I just love new cards. I love spoiler season anyway. That's it for the video. If you made it this far, I appreciate you as always. Thank you for watching. If you're new, consider subscribing. And yeah, until next time, may you walk on warm sands.